"Can I give you a hug?" asked the homeless boy to the millionaire crying in the street. Richard Miller felt the world crumbling around him as people hurried past on the sidewalk, oblivious to his despair. The successful 45-year-old businessman had just experienced the worst moment of his life, all because of a work call that couldn't wait. "Can I give you a hug?" a sweet little voice asked. Richard lifted his tear-streaked face and saw a small boy standing before him. The child couldn't have been more than 5, barefoot and dressed in dirty clothes that hung too large on his thin frame. His messy blonde hair and bright blue eyes shone even in the cold darkness of Denver's night. "I saw you crying," the little boy continued, stretching out his tiny arms. "My mum always said a hug makes everything better." Richard was speechless. How could this child, clearly left to fend for himself, offer comfort to a stranger? The businessman glanced around the busy Cherry Creek Drive, near the mall where he had lost his 4-year-old son, Ethan. You shouldn't be out here alone," he managed to say between sobs. "I live here," the boy replied matter-of-factly, pointing to a cardboard box behind a trash can. "But I saw you were really sad. My name's Tommy." Richard's heart clenched even tighter. How could he be wallowing in self-pity when this child was in a far worse situation? At least Ethan was alive, just lost in the mall, but this boy... "Tommy, where are your parents?" he asked, wiping his face with the back of his hand. "I don't know," the boy shrugged. "But you seem like you need help more than me right now. Why are you crying?" Richard hesitated. How could he explain to a 5-year-old the pain of losing a child? How could he say he'd spent 3 hours searching the mall for Ethan, that he'd already called security, that his wife Jennifer was panicking? "I lost my little boy," he finally said, his voice breaking. "He's 4 and he was with me at the mall. I took an important call and when I turned around, he was gone." Tommy's eyes suddenly lit up. "A tiny little boy with black hair and a Spider-Man shirt?" Richard's eyes widened, his heart racing. "How do you know that?" "I saw him," Tommy exclaimed, bouncing excitedly. "He was playing at the park near the bench with a really old lady who had grey hair and a pearl necklace." "Where?" Richard jumped to his feet, tears now of hope. "Where exactly?" "At the park behind the mall near the square. The lady was pushing him on the swing and he was laughing a lot." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Richard ran like he'd never run before, with Tommy struggling to keep up on his little legs. Within minutes they reached the park, and there was Ethan, happily swinging in the arms of a grey-haired woman Richard recognized instantly. "Mom!" he shouted, rushing toward his own mother, Mrs. Margaret. "Richard!" The woman turned, looking genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "I was looking for Ethan. I thought he was lost." Richard scooped his son into his arms, covering him in kisses. "Ethan, Daddy was so worried." "Grandma Margaret came to get me to play, Daddy," Ethan said, grinning. "She said you were too busy." Richard looked at his mother, trying to make sense of what had happened. "Mom, how did you know where we were? Why didn't you tell me you were taking Ethan?" Mrs. Margaret lowered her eyes, looking embarrassed. "I was at the mall shopping when I saw you on the phone, yelling at someone about contracts and deadlines. Ethan was all alone, playing near the fountain, with that sad little face he makes when you don't pay attention to him." Richard felt a weight in his chest. It was true. He'd been so caught up in a crisis at work that he'd ignored his son for nearly an hour. "I just wanted him to have some fun, to enjoy himself," Mrs. Margaret continued. "But when we went back to the mall to look for you, you were gone. The security guard said you were frantic, searching for Ethan. Mom, I was worried sick. I thought someone had taken him. I know, son, I know, and I'm sorry. But I was tired of seeing you neglect my grandson because of work. Do you remember how it was when you were little? Your father was always there, always playing with you." Richard swallowed hard. It was true. Over the last few months, he'd become an absent father, always busy with meetings, calls, and contracts. Then he remembered Tommy. He turned to thank the boy who had been crucial in finding Ethan, but the little boy was already walking away, slowly heading toward his cardboard box. "Tommy, wait!" Richard called. The boy turned, a shy smile on his face. "I'm glad you found your little boy. But you helped me so much. How can I thank you?" Tommy thought for a moment, tapping his little finger on his chin. "Do you have a sandwich? I'm a little hungry." Richard's heart broke. He quickly checked his pockets but found only credit cards and a few large bills. "I have money. I can buy you more than just a sandwich, but—" "No, thank you," Tommy interrupted, shaking his head. "I just want the sandwich. Money doesn't do me any good." Mrs. Margaret, who had been silently watching the whole exchange, leaned down and whispered something in her grandson's ear. Ethan ran up to Tommy and held out the lunchbox his grandmother had been carrying. "Here, you can have my lunch." Grandma brought ham sandwiches and apple juice. Tommy's eyes lit up, but he hesitated. "Are you sure? Won't you be hungry?" "I'm sure," Ethan said excitedly, "and if you want, you can be my friend." Richard watched the scene with a mix of pride and shame. His 4-year-old son showed more empathy than he had in years. Tommy took the lunchbox and hugged Ethan tightly. "Thank you, Ethan. You're a really good boy." As Tommy walked away to eat, Richard turned to his mother. "Mom, that boy lives on the streets. How can a child so young be abandoned like that?" "I don't know, son. But I do know the world is full of Tommies, while we complain about problems that aren't even real problems." That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He couldn't stop thinking about the 5-year-old boy sleeping in a cardboard box, while Ethan slept in his warm bed, in a room full of toys. The next day, Richard cancelled all his morning meetings and went back downtown with Ethan. He wanted to find Tommy again, but when they reached the spot where the cardboard box had been, no one was there. "Where's Tommy, Daddy?" Ethan asked. "I don't know, son. Let's look for him." They spent the whole morning walking through downtown streets, asking shopkeepers and homeless people if they'd seen a little blonde-haired boy. Some said they knew Tommy, that he came around sometimes, but no one knew where he was. Over the next few days, Richard found himself leaving the office early, driving through downtown in search of the boy. His wife, Jennifer, noticed the change in her husband's behavior. "Richard, you're different. Since that night at the mall, it seems like something's been bothering you." Richard told his wife the whole story, from the despair of losing Ethan to the encounter with Tommy. "I can't stop thinking about that boy, Jennifer. How can a 5-year-old be abandoned on the streets? And how was he so generous with me, offering a hug when he was the one who needed help?" Jennifer held her husband's hand. "Maybe this meeting happened for a reason, Richard. Maybe it's a sign we need to do something." "But what? I don't even know where he is." It was Ethan who had the idea. During dinner, the little boy raised his hand as if he were in school. "Daddy, why don't we put up posters with Tommy's picture?" When Buddy got lost, the lady on the corner did that and found him. Richard smiled. His son was referring to the neighbor's little dog that had run away the month before. "But son, I don't have a picture of Tommy." "Then draw one," Ethan suggested excitedly. The next day, Richard did something he never imagined he'd do in his life. He hired a sketch artist to make a composite drawing of Tommy based on his description. He had hundreds of posters printed with the question, "Does anyone know this boy?" and his phone number. For 2 weeks, Richard and Ethan put up posters all over downtown. They got several calls, but none led to Tommy, until one rainy Thursday afternoon the phone rang. "Hello, it's about the boy on the poster," said a woman's voice. "I look after some street kids here at the downtown bridge. There's a little boy here who looks like the drawing." Richard asked Jennifer to pick up Ethan from school and rushed to the address the woman had given. When he arrived at the bridge, he found a woman around 60 years old handing out soup to a group of homeless people. Among them, 4 children sat on a tarp spread on the ground. "Are you the one who called?" Richard asked, approaching. "That's me, Mrs. Grace," the woman replied, smiling. "That's the boy you're looking for over there." Richard looked in the direction she pointed and felt his heart race. There was Tommy, sitting beside 3 other children, sharing a pot of soup. "Tommy!" Richard called. The boy looked up and a huge smile spread across his face. "Mr. Richard," he shouted, running to hug the businessman's legs. Richard knelt and hugged the boy tightly, feeling tears stream down his face. "I've been looking for you for weeks, Tommy." "Why?" the boy asked, confused. Because I wanted to thank you properly, and to see if you're okay." Tommy stepped back slightly and pointed to the other children. I'm taking care of my friends. This is Michael. He pointed to a boy about 7. This is Emma, a girl who looked about 6. And this is Matthew, another boy around 8. Do you live here? Richard asked, glancing around the cold, damp space under the bridge. We look out for each other, Michael replied warily. Tommy's like our big brother, even though he's the smallest. Richard spoke with Mrs. Grace and learned she volunteered for an organization that helped the homeless. She said Tommy had shown up there about a month ago, along with a small sick dog. He protects these kids like he's responsible for them, Mrs. Grace explained. Shares everything he gets, down to the last crumb. And the little dog? Richard asked. Tommy grew sad. Daisy was really sick. She coughed a lot and couldn't eat anymore. Richard felt a lump in his throat, realizing the boy was speaking about the dog in the past tense. What happened to her? She went to sleep and didn't wake up, Tommy said, his eyes wet. But before she fell asleep, I promised her I'd take care of my friends. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Richard spent the rest of the afternoon talking with the children. He discovered each had a heartbreaking story of abandonment or neglect. Michael had run away from a shelter where he was beaten every day. Emma had been abandoned by her drug-addicted mother. Matthew had lost his parents in an accident and fled his aunt and uncle's home where he was mistreated. Why don't you seek help? Richard asked. Who would believe us? Michael replied bitterly. Everyone thinks street kids are lazy, that we're on the streets because we want to be. And if they take us back to those places, they'll separate our family, Emma added, moving closer to Tommy. Tommy promised no one would ever hurt us again. Richard looked at the 5-year-old boy, who had taken on the responsibility of protecting kids older than himself. Tommy, how are you so brave when you're so small? My mum said we have to take care of those in need, the boy answered. She said she'd come back for me, but it must be taking a while because she's helping others who need it more. Richard's heart shattered. It was clear Tommy's mother had abandoned him, but the boy clung to hope she'd return. When Richard got home that night, he told Jennifer and Ethan everything. Dad, can we help them? Ethan asked. Of course we can, son. But it's complicated. They're afraid of being separated. Then bring everyone to our house, Ethan suggested, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Jennifer smiled but shook her head. It's not that easy, Ethan. We have to think carefully and do things the right way. In the days that followed, Richard began visiting the group of children daily. He brought food, blankets, and most of all, kindness. Slowly, he earned not just Tommy's trust, but the other 3's as well. One afternoon, Tommy pulled Richard aside and whispered, Mr. Richard, can I tell you a secret? Of course, Tommy. I wasn't born on the streets. I lived in a house with my mom and stepdad. But my stepdad didn't like me and hit my mom when she defended me. Richard felt anger rise in his chest. And your mom, where is she? One night, my stepdad got really mad and said either I left or he would. My mom cried so much, gave me a kiss and said I had to go somewhere good people take care of kids. She took me to a place full of children, said she'd come back the next day to get me. A shelter. I think so, but it was really bad, Mr. Richard. People yelled at us. There wasn't enough food, and some bigger boys hit the smaller ones. I ran away with Daisy. Daisy was at the shelter. No, I found her on the street, all hurt. Then I decided I'd take care of her and other kids who needed help, just like my mom took care of me. Richard hugged Tommy, silently promising to do everything to change the boy's life. That night, Richard talked at length with Jennifer about how they could effectively help the children. Richard, I have an idea, Jennifer said. Remember my friend Rachel, who works in the city's social services? I do. She could guide us on the legal steps. Maybe there's a way to help these kids without splitting them up. The next day, Richard and Jennifer met with Rachel, who was moved by the story. You need to understand this is a delicate situation, Rachel explained. These children likely ran away from institutions. If authorities find out where they are, they'll be taken back immediately. But is there any legal way to help them? Jennifer asked. There is. You can become a foster family. It's a process that takes a few months, but it allows you to care for the children legally while a permanent solution is sought. Richard was excited. And can they stay together? It depends. If you have the capacity to take them all in, yes. But there are 4 children, Richard. Are you sure you're prepared for this? Richard and Jennifer exchanged glances. It was a decision that would change their lives completely. We'll talk it over and give you an answer, Richard said. That night during dinner, the family discussed the possibility. Ethan, do you understand that if we bring these children home, everything will change? Jennifer asked. You'll get less attention just for yourself, and we'll have to share everything. Ethan didn't hesitate for a second. I want them to come, Mum. Tommy is my best friend and he needs a real family. Mrs. Margaret, who was having dinner with them, spoke up. Richard, you know you can count on me to help. These children deserve a chance. Richard looked at his family and felt his heart warm. He had the best family in the world. The next day, Richard went to the downtown bridge with a proposal for the children. He explained the possibility of them coming to live temporarily in their home, but said everything would have to be done legally. That means you'll have to trust me and accept that some adults will come talk to you about your stories. The children were silent for a long time. It was Michael who spoke first. What if they try to separate us? I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you together, Richard said, but I can't guarantee it. What I can promise is that I'll always fight for you. Tommy held Richard's hand. I trust you, sir. If you think it's best, I accept. One by one, the other 3 agreed as well. The process was more complex than Richard had imagined. First, they had to officially register the children's location with the proper authorities. Then they went through a series of interviews and psychological evaluations. During this time, Richard and Jennifer visited the children daily, bringing hot meals, clean clothes, and most importantly, affection. It was during one of these visits that Richard noticed Tommy wasn't himself. The boy seemed worn out and was coughing constantly. Tommy, are you okay? I'm just a little tired, the boy replied, forcing a smile. Mrs. Grace approached Richard. He's been like this for 3 days. I think he caught a bad flu with this weather change. Richard touched Tommy's forehead and realized he had a fever. I'm taking you to the doctor right now. You don't have to, Mr. Richard, Tommy protested. It'll pass soon. Of course I do. You took care of Daisy when she was sick. Now it's my turn to take care of you. At the hospital, the doctor diagnosed early-stage pneumonia. Nothing serious if treated properly, the doctor explained. But he needs rest, medication, and proper nutrition. Richard looked at the doctor. Doctor, he lives on the streets. There's no way to ensure rest or proper nutrition where he is. The doctor looked visibly concerned. In that case, I'd recommend hospitalization until he recovers. Tommy started crying. No, Mr. Richard, I don't want to stay in the hospital alone. What about my friends? Who'll take care of them? Richard held the boy's hand. Tommy, you need to take care of yourself so you can take care of them. And you won't be alone. I'll stay here with you. But what about your job? Work can wait. You're more important. Richard spent the next 3 days in the hospital with Tommy, working from his laptop when the boy slept and telling stories when he was awake. During those hours together, Tommy shared more details about his life. Richard discovered that the boy could read some words, loved to draw, and dreamed of becoming a doctor to care for sick children. Why a doctor? Richard asked. Because doctors help people who are suffering, Tommy replied, just like you helped me when I was sad about Daisy. On the 3rd day, when Tommy was discharged from the hospital, Richard got a surprise. Jennifer arrived accompanied by a woman he didn't know. Richard, this is the social worker Rachel recommended to us. She has good news. The woman introduced herself as Susan and explained that the emergency foster care process had been approved, especially considering Tommy's health condition. You can take all 4 children home today, Susan said. We'll monitor the case weekly, but for now they'll be under your care. Tommy's eyes widened. Really? We're going to live in a real house? Really, Richard answered, moved. When they reached the downtown bridge to pick up the other children, Richard noticed they had packed their few belongings into a plastic bag. Were you waiting for us? Richard asked. Tommy said you always keep your promises, Emma replied. We trusted you. The drive to Richard's house was quiet. The 4 children stared out the car window with wide eyes, as if seeing the world for the first time. When they arrived, Jennifer and Mrs. Margaret were waiting at the door with Ethan. "Welcome to our home," Jennifer said, smiling. Ethan ran to hug Tommy. "Now we're really brothers." Richard watched the scene with emotion. Seeing these children who had suffered so much, welcomed with such warmth, made everything worthwhile. The first few days were challenging. The children weren't used to routines, rules, or even the comfort of a home. Michael, especially, struggled to trust and remained constantly alert, as if waiting for something bad to happen. Emma cried every night, missing her mother. Matthew ate compulsively, afraid the food would run out. And Tommy felt responsible for taking care of everyone, finding it hard to accept that adults would now care for him. Richard and Jennifer divided the tasks. Jennifer took charge of Emma, who needed a mother figure. Richard focused on Michael, who responded better to a male presence. Mrs. Margaret grew especially fond of Matthew, who loved listening to her stories, and Ethan naturally became Tommy's best friend. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. After 2 weeks of adjustment, Richard decided it was time to enroll the children in school. First, they needed documents, as none of them had birth certificates or any identification. The bureaucratic process was long and exhausting, but they finally managed to sort everything out. Richard enrolled them in the same private school Ethan attended to ease the transition. On the first day, Richard took all 5 children together. The school principal, Mrs. Barbara, personally welcomed them. "Mr. Richard, it's an honor to have these children at our school. Our staff is prepared to help them adjust." Tommy tugged Richard's hand. "Mr. Richard, what if the other kids don't like me?" Richard knelt to his level. "Tommy, you're a special, brave, and kind boy. Anyone would be lucky to have you as a friend. And remember, Ethan will always be nearby." The first days at school were tough. The children were behind in their learning and sometimes felt different from their classmates. But little by little, with the support of their teachers and the friendship of Ethan, they began to adapt. It was during the second week of school that Richard received an unexpected call. "Hello, this is Mercy Hospital. Are you Richard Miller?" "Yes, I am." "We have a patient here who says she knows a child under your care, a woman named Christine Davis. She's asking about a boy named Thomas." Richard's heart raced. Tommy's full name was Thomas. "How is she? What happened?" "She had a work accident and is hospitalized. She's very anxious for news about the child." Richard took down the hospital address and decided to go there, but first he needed to talk to Tommy. When he got home, he found all the children doing homework at the kitchen table, with Jennifer helping. "Tommy, can I talk to you?" The boy stood up, worried. "Did I do something wrong, Mr. Richard?" "No, son. In fact, it might be good news. A woman named Christine Davis is at the hospital asking for you." Tommy turned pale and sat back down. "My mom's name is Christine." Richard felt a mix of joy and apprehension. Joy because Tommy might be reunited with his mother, but apprehension because it could mean he'd no longer be part of their family. "Do you want to go see her?" Tommy hesitated. "She won't just want to take me, will she? What about my siblings?" Richard realized the boy was referring to the other 3 as his siblings. "I don't know, Tommy. Let's talk to her first, okay?" At the hospital, Richard and Tommy found a fragile-looking woman, around 30 years old, lying in a simple room. When she saw Tommy, she began to cry desperately. "Thomas, my boy!" She stretched out her arms. Tommy stood frozen in the doorway, unmoving. Richard noticed the boy didn't run to hug his mother as one might expect. "Thomas, please come here to Mommy," Christine said, crying. Slowly, Tommy approached the bed. "Mom, where were you? I waited so long where you left me." Christine looked at Richard, confused. "At St. Francis shelter? I came back for you a week later, but they told me you'd run away." "I looked for you for months, son. I ran away because it was really bad there, Mom. The people were mean to the kids." Richard introduced himself and told Christine the whole story of how he met Tommy and how he'd become part of their family. "I didn't know," Christine sobbed. "I thought you were being cared for. Your stepfather said he knew the shelter director, that he was a good person." "And where is my stepfather?" Tommy asked. Christine lowered her eyes. He left, Thomas. After you were gone, he said he didn't want the responsibility anymore and left with another woman. Richard saw the pain in Tommy's eyes. The boy had been rejected by his stepfather and, in a way, abandoned by his mother. "Mom, are you here to take me now?" "Of course, my boy. As soon as I'm out of the hospital, we'll live together again." "What about my siblings?" Christine looked confused at Richard. "What siblings?" Richard explained about Michael, Emma and Matthew, and how Tommy felt responsible for them. "Thomas, they're not your real siblings," Christine said. "They each have their own families." "But they don't have families, Mom, just like I didn't when you left me at the shelter." Richard saw the dilemma forming. Christine wanted her son back, which was natural and fair. But Tommy had formed bonds with the other children, bonds that felt as real as blood to him. "Christine, can I speak with you alone for a moment?" Richard asked. They stepped into the hallway, leaving Tommy in the room. "Christine, I understand your wish to have your son back. But you need to understand that Tommy has been through a lot. He sees himself as the protector of these other children." "But he's just a child. He can't be responsible for other kids." "I know, but in his mind, they're his family. Separating him from them now could be very traumatic." Christine thought for a moment. "What are you suggesting?" "That you focus on recovering first, that you find a job, a home, and during that time Tommy stays with us. You can visit him whenever you want, rebuild your relationship little by little." "You think I can't take care of my own son?" "That's not it, Christine. But you're in the hospital, with no job, no home. Tommy needs stability right now." Christine started crying again. "I've missed so much of his life. He didn't even want to hug me properly." "Because he's hurt. But with time and patience, you can rebuild that bond." When they returned to the room, Tommy was sitting in a chair, swinging his legs. "Thomas, Mommy doesn't have a place to live right now," said Christine. "Can you stay with Mr. Richard until I find a new job?" Tommy looked relieved. "And then?" "Then we'll talk about what's best for you." Richard could see Christine was being sincere. She truly wanted what was best for her son. In the following days, Christine recovered from the accident and started visiting Tommy every day after school. Richard watched their interactions, noticing how they were slowly rebuilding trust. Jennifer helped Christine get a part-time job at a clothing store downtown. Richard offered to pay for a small apartment near his house so Christine could settle down. "Why are you doing so much for me?" Christine asked one day. "Because Tommy loves you," Jennifer replied, "and we love Tommy. We want him to be happy, and he'll only be truly happy if he has you back in his life." During that time, something unexpected happened. Christine also grew fond of the other 3 children. She started bringing small gifts for everyone, not just Tommy. "They really are special," Christine told Richard one day. "I understand why Thomas got so attached to them." It was on a Saturday afternoon that everything changed again. Richard was in the backyard playing with the kids when Tommy approached him. "Mr. Richard, can I tell you something?" "Of course, Tommy. I want to keep living here with you." Richard was surprised. "But what about your mother? She loves you so much." "I love her too. But you're my family now. Ethan is my brother. Michael, Emma, and Matthew too. Mrs. Jennifer is like a mother to me. Mrs. Margaret is my grandma. And you're my dad." Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. "Tommy, but your mother will be very sad." "I already talked to her. She understands. She said what matters is that I'm happy. And I'm really happy here." That night, Richard spoke with Christine. "He really wants to stay with you," she said, crying. "And I get it. You've given him something I couldn't. A complete family, stability, unconditional love. Christine, you'll always be his mother. That will never change." "I know. And I'm happy he has you. Can I still visit?" "Always. You're part of his family, so you're part of ours too." 2 months later, Richard and Jennifer officially adopted all 4 children. It was a simple ceremony at the courthouse, but for them, it was the most important day of their lives. Tommy, who now went by his full name, Thomas Richard Miller, gave a heartfelt speech on Adoption Day. I want to thank Mr. Richard and Mrs. Jennifer for giving me the family I've always dreamed of. I've learned that family isn't just about sharing the same blood. It's about sharing the same love in your heart. The life of the Miller family had completely changed, but in a wonderful way. The house was always full of laughter, conversations, and the normal little squabbles between siblings. Richard had drastically cut back his work hours to be present in the children's lives. Michael turned out to have a talent for math and dreamed of becoming an engineer. Emma discovered a love for dance and was always practicing routines around the house. Matthew fell in love with cooking and helped Mrs. Margaret in the kitchen every day. Ethan became the youngest brother in age, but the most protective of them all, always standing up for the others at school. And Tommy, who still dreamed of becoming a doctor, became the heart of the family. He was the one who settled arguments between his siblings, comforted them when they were sad, and celebrated their achievements. Christine became part of the family's routine, joining them for dinner once a week and attending all their important events. She and Jennifer became friends, united by their love for Tommy. A year after the adoption, Richard received a phone call that left him worried. "Mr. Richard, this is Thomas's school. He got into a fight today." Richard was surprised. Tommy had never been in trouble before. What happened? A new boy at school was picking on a younger child, calling her an orphan and saying no one wanted her. Thomas stepped in and ended up shoving the bully. Richard sighed. It was just like Tommy to stand up for someone being treated unfairly. When he arrived at the school, he found Tommy sitting in the principal's office, his face bruised but his expression defiant. "Thomas, you know violence doesn't solve problems," said Mrs. Barbara. "I know, ma'am, but he was making Sophia cry. I asked him to stop, and he wouldn't." Richard turned to his son. "Tommy, you did the right thing by standing up for your classmate, but you can't solve things with force." "Then how do I fix it, Dad?" Tommy asked, using the word dad for the first time. Richard's heart skipped. Tommy had called him Dad. "By talking, son, getting an adult to help. There are other ways. But when I was little and on the streets, no one came to help when someone hurt me. That's why I learned we have to defend ourselves and the people we love." Richard understood. Tommy was acting based on the traumatic experiences of his past. "Son, you're not on the streets anymore. Now you have a family, adults who will protect you and teach you the right way to handle things." That night, Richard had a long talk with Tommy about peaceful ways to resolve conflicts. He also learned that Sophia, the girl Tommy had defended, was going through an adoption process similar to what they had experienced. "Dad, Sophia lives in a shelter and is waiting for a family to adopt her," Tommy explained. "That's why that boy was teasing her." "How did you know that?" "Because I recognized the look in her eyes. It's the same look I had when I thought no one wanted me." Richard was moved by his son's sensitivity. "How about we invite Sophia over to play this weekend?" Tommy's eyes lit up. "Really, Dad? Really? And maybe we can help her in other ways too." The following Saturday, Sophia came to play at the Miller's house. She was a shy, reserved 7-year-old, but she slowly warmed up to the family's kindness. Richard and Jennifer learned that Sophia had been in the shelter for 2 years, ever since the grandmother who raised her had passed away. She had never known her parents. "She's such a sweet girl," Jennifer remarked to Richard that evening, "and she seems to fit right in with our kids. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? That our family still has room for one more daughter?" Richard smiled. "Exactly. The process to adopt Sophia was faster since Richard and Jennifer were now known by the authorities as a stable and capable family. 3 months later, Sophia officially became the 6th child of the Miller family. "Now we're a real, complete family," said Ethan, hugging all his siblings. "No, Ethan," corrected Tommy. "Our family was always complete. It just grew with more love." Years passed. Richard started a smaller company, more focused on social projects. Jennifer went back to school and graduated in psychology, specializing in children in vulnerable situations. The 6 children grew up close like true siblings. When Tommy turned 15, he said something to Richard that stayed with him forever. "Dad, remember that night when I asked if I could give you a hug? I remember it like it was yesterday. I didn't just want to comfort you. I needed affection too." That hug changed my life because it showed me there are still good people in the world. And you changed my life, son. You taught me that being a father isn't just about providing food and shelter. It's about giving love, attention, and being present. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. If you could go back in time, would you change anything? Richard thought for a moment. I would. I'd have ended that phone call sooner and paid attention to Ethan from the start. Then I'd have met you earlier, and our family would have been together longer. Tommy smiled. I'd change one thing too. What? I'd have asked you to adopt me that first night. Then we wouldn't have lost so much time. Richard hugged his son, knowing that the street boy who had approached him on that cold night had been the greatest gift life could have given him. The Miller family became well known in the community for their social work. Richard created a program at his company to hire mothers in vulnerable situations, offering daycare for their children and psychological support. Jennifer opened a practice that provided free counseling to children who had endured traumas like those her own kids had faced. Christine, who had become like an older sister to Jennifer, ran a support group for mothers who had lost custody of their children due to difficult circumstances. Mrs. Margaret, at 75, went back to school and became a storyteller, visiting shelters and hospitals to bring joy to other children. But the family's most special project was Hug House, a space Richard and Jennifer built in their backyard. It was a place where children from shelters could spend weekends experiencing what it was like to live in a family. Tommy was the main counselor at Hug House. At 15, he had a unique ability to connect with vulnerable children. How do you do that? Richard asked one day after seeing Tommy get an extremely withdrawn child to open up and play. I look into their eyes, and they know I understand what they're feeling, Tommy replied, because I've been where they are. One Sunday afternoon, as the whole family gathered in the backyard, Tommy made an announcement. Everyone, I have something to tell you. They all stopped what they were doing to listen. You know I always wanted to be a doctor, right? We do, said Jennifer, and we're so proud of your plans. Well, I changed my mind. Richard looked concerned. Changed how, son? I still want to help people, but not as a doctor. I want to be a psychologist like Mom. I want to help kids who've been through what I've been through. Jennifer was moved. Tommy, are you sure? I am. And you know why? Because when I was on the streets, I didn't need medicine. I needed someone who understood my pain, who'd hug me, who'd show me I mattered. Richard looked at the family gathered in the backyard. Michael, now 18, had been accepted into engineering school. Emma, 17, had earned a scholarship to a prestigious dance academy. Matthew, 16, worked part-time at a restaurant and dreamed of opening his own business someday. Ethan, 14, was the student council leader at school and wanted to become a lawyer. Sophia, 12, was the family artist, always drawing and painting. And Tommy, who would turn 16 in a few months, had grown into a responsible, caring young man, determined to make a difference in other children's lives. You know what I've learned from you, my children? Richard said, looking at each of them. I've learned that life puts people in our path for a reason. You've taught me that being a father isn't about giving opportunities. It's about recognizing the potential that's already inside each of you. And we've learned that family isn't just who made you, but who chooses you every day, Michael added. And that a simple hug can change everything, Tommy said, looking at Richard. Christine, who was present as always for their Sunday family gatherings, stood up. I want to take this moment to thank you all once again. You didn't just save Thomas, you saved me too. You gave me the chance to be a mother again, even from afar. You've always been a mother, Christine, Jennifer said. You just needed help to embrace that role in the best way possible. And now Thomas has two mothers, just like the rest of us, Sophia chimed in. I have all of you as my family, but I also carry the memory of my grandmother. Love only multiplies. It never divides. Mrs. Margaret, sitting in a chair watching the family, whispered, Richard, do you remember when you were little and used to ask why your father and I always helped the neighbors? I do, Mom. I told you that one day you'd understand. Do you? Richard looked around at his 6 children, his wife, Tommy's mother, all united not by blood, but by love. I do, Mom. I understand that helping others is the only way we truly help ourselves. As the sun began to set that Sunday evening, the family gathered for their traditional dinner, a custom Richard had started. Every Sunday, they ate together, and each shared the best thing that had happened to them that week. "I'll start," Ethan said. "The best part of my week was seeing Thomas help that new kid from St. Francis shelter settle in at Hug House." "Mine," Emma said, "was finally teaching that dance routine to the girls who came on Saturday." "Mine," Matthew added, "was seeing Mrs. Margaret's face light up when she tasted the cake I baked." "Mine," Sophia said, "was finishing the drawing I started last month." "Mine," Michael said, "was getting confirmation of my university scholarship." "Mine," Tommy said, "was receiving a letter from one of the first kids who went through Hug House. She got adopted and is really happy now." "Mine," Jennifer said, "was watching all of you grow into such amazing people." "Mine," Christine said, "was Thomas calling me Mom in front of his school friends without hesitation." "Mine," Mrs. Margaret said softly, "was turning 75, surrounded by so many grandchildren who love me." Everyone turned to Richard, waiting for him to share his best moment of the week. "The best part of my week," Richard said, his voice thick with emotion, "was realizing that exactly 7 years ago, on a cold night, I was sitting on a sidewalk crying, thinking I'd lost everything. And then a tiny little boy walked up to me and asked if he could give me a hug." He looked at Tommy. "And today I realized that in that hug, I didn't just gain a son, I gained an entire family, a new way of seeing the world, and a reason to be a better person every single day." Tommy stood up from his chair, walked over to Richard and hugged him tightly. "Dad, want to hear something?" "Go ahead, son." "That night, when I asked if I could give you a hug, I was really scared you'd say no." "Why?" "Because if you'd said no, I would have lost hope that there were good people in the world." Richard hugged his son tighter. "And if I'd known you were testing my kindness, I would have given you not just a hug, but also a place in our family that very same night. But maybe if that had happened, we wouldn't have met Michael, Emma, Matthew, and Sophia," said Tommy. "Things happen at the right time." Jennifer looked at the whole gathered family and said, "Do you know the most beautiful part of all this?" "What?" they all asked in unison. "It's that you never stopped helping others. You took the love you received and spread it to more people. That's the true multiplication of goodness." That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Richard stayed alone in the backyard, gazing at the stars. He thought about how his life had completely changed because of what seemed like a chance meeting on a cold sidewalk. He thought of all the children who had passed through Hug House, all the families formed through the social programs they'd created, all the lives touched by that first hug Tommy had given him. Jennifer came over and sat beside him. "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking if someone had told me this story 8 years ago, I'd have said it was impossible. A street kid completely changing the life of a wealthy family. But it wasn't quite like that," said Jennifer. "You changed his life too. Really, you saved each other." "That's true. I was so focused on work that I was losing sight of what really mattered. Tommy taught me how to be a real father. And now he'll teach others how to be parents through the work he wants to do." Richard smiled. "Do you think he'll be able to help a lot of kids?" "I'm sure of it. He has something no college can teach. He knows exactly how it feels to be in their shoes." The next morning, Richard woke up to a surprise. Tommy was in the kitchen making breakfast for the whole family. "Good morning, Dad. Made your coffee just how you like it." "Thank you, son, but why are you up so early?" "Because today's a special day." "Why?" "Because today marks exactly 7 years since I asked if I could give you a hug." Richard was moved. Tommy had remembered the exact date. "And do you know what I want as a gift?" "Tell me, son." "I want you to let me give you another hug." Richard laughed, embracing his son. "Son, you never need permission to hug me. You can hug me whenever you want, for the rest of your life. Then get ready, because I'm going to hug you every day till you're old and gray. And I'll return every one of those hugs, son." Just then, Ethan walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas. "Morning, family. Why are you all up so early?" "We're celebrating the anniversary of the first hug," Tommy explained. "Oh, so today's a holiday in our house," said Ethan, hugging them both. Miller Family Hug Day. Soon, the other kids trickled into the kitchen, and without anyone organizing it, they formed a big hugging circle. You know what would be cool, said Emma, if we did this every year. Every March 15th, we celebrate our family's Hug Day. I think that's a beautiful idea, said Jennifer, who had just arrived. And we can invite all the kids from Hug House to celebrate with us. And all the families formed through our projects, Michael suggested. Let's throw a big hug party, said Sophia, already excited at the idea of planning it. Richard looked at his family, realizing that Tommy's first hug had set off a chain reaction of love that kept spreading. You know what I find most amazing about all this, Richard said. What, Dad? They all asked. It all started with a tiny boy who had the courage to offer comfort to a stranger, even when he was in a much worse situation himself. It's because when you have little, you cherish what you can give even more, said Tommy, with a wisdom that still surprised them after all these years. And now that we have a lot, we give even more, added Matthew. Mrs. Margaret, who had woken up to the noise of the family gathered in the kitchen, appeared with a smile. What's all this morning commotion about? We're celebrating, Grandma, explained Ethan. Today marks 7 years since Thomas asked if he could give Dad a hug. Oh, so you're celebrating the day our family truly began, said Mrs. Margaret, her eyes shining. Exactly, Grandma. Want to join the hug circle? I'd love to, my dear. Mrs. Margaret joined the circle and they all stood there, hugging for several minutes in silence, just feeling the love flowing between them. It was Christine who broke the silence, appearing at the kitchen door. Sorry for coming so early, but... Mom, Christine, Tommy shouted, running to hug her. You came at the perfect time. We're celebrating. Christine was pulled into the hug circle, and there they all were. Richard, Jennifer, Tommy, Michael, Emma, Matthew, Ethan, Sophia, Mrs. Margaret, and Christine. 10 people fate had brought together through a simple hug. Do you know what I wish for our family? Richard said. Tell us, Dad, said Tommy. I hope you never forget the power of a hug, that you'll always be able to offer comfort to those who are suffering, just like Tommy did for me. And that you never lose the ability to accept help when you need it, Jennifer added. And that you always remember family is who chooses to stay, even when things get tough, said Mrs. Margaret. And that you never stop believing people can change for the better, said Christine. We promise, they all said in unison. The end of the story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this story of love, resilience, and family? Have you ever been in a situation where a simple gesture changed everything? Share in the comments which part moved you the most. Do you believe love can transform realities like it did for the Miller family? Leave your honest thoughts, and if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.